I want to start by thanking Deputy Boyd Barrett, Deputy Osnoddy, Deputy Healy and Deputy Daly, and anybody else who I leave out, I apologise. But I think without the voice of the opposition to demand a debate on this and continually get up all this week at both the Business Committee and here on the floor, we would not be having this debate. It was quite clear that the government didn't want the discussion, that it was being rushed through, that it was being sneaked through, and without deputies like these, we wouldn't be having the discussion. What really is remarkable, and people out there should hear this, defence spending will jump from €900 million a year to between €3 and €4 billion a year. Now, that is a remarkable day after we lost another homeless woman on the streets of this state. We can't house the homeless. We can't pay pension equality for people who are retiring. Geez, you couldn't do that. That cost you €70 million. But all of a sudden we can find all these other billions to fund arms. We need homes. We need decent pensions. We don't need arms. And the aim about this is not about keeping us safe from the terrorism. The terrorism is actually what is going on here. And I've listened to that, to what Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have had to say, deputies who believe that this is about cooperation and genuine peacekeeping. The reality is, however, alas Ceann Comhairle, this is about cooperation with NATO, more involvement with spending on the European Defence Fund. And precisely what Deputy Chambers and others refuse to see, this is about the creation of a European army. The word army means aggression. It means tackling problems with arms, with bombs, with bullets, with guns, with heavy machinery. And it is something that indeed Fine Gael have always supported, but something that our constitution and our people are clear about. We are not aggressors. And if we are peacekeepers, we are not being paranoid or hysterical about this. That's what we're being painted as by the Taoiseach this morning, but there is nothing hysterical or paranoid about it. In Europe, the elite must be delighted that they're giving us their backing and their solidarity on Brexit, and we're going to move to support them on this destruction and the capacity that will give them to create a big power bloc, a big army across Europe. So it is about military intervention. And I think we should think about that military invention of the great imperial powers of Europe and what it has done in terms of humanitarianism. At the moment, we are looking at the re-emergence of slavery in Libya. And Europe has a pact with Libya where it pays it to keep refugees inside Libya. It pays it to keep people who are being held up in front of marketeers by this young man. He's a good, strong young man. You can bid for him now. It's bringing us right back to the heavy old days prior to the American Revolution, prior to the French Revolution, when there was no such thing as liberty, equality and fraternity. And that is where we're heading for the population of the world who are fleeing destitution, famine and war, caused in no small measure by military intervention in the past by the likes of the French and the British and the Portuguese when they scrambled for Africa and the Middle East and have left a legacy of terrorism behind them. This latest move has been driven by those very same interests of French and German imperialism, in particular in the current period. European humanitarian credentials are with the drowned 30-odd thousand people in the Mediterranean and those imprisoned in those condemned camps of Libya, Macedonia, Greece and elsewhere. People are being raped, abused, tortured and starved in these camps, and we pay for it to happen because we pay those states to keep them there. And that's our humanitarian credentials, and we jump from that into spending a big pile of our money on militarism, into saying that we want to back up this European project, this most racist, brutal European project. We want to back it up on the basis, as Deputy Boyd Barrett pointed out, that this is supposed to be about keeping us safe from terrorism, but it's actually entrapping tens of thousands of people in the most miserable conditions. I want to finally finish and just having a word to the soldiers and the sailors and the military personnel of this country. They know, and you know, they know because we've discussed it here, but they live it. The reality of serving in the defence forces in this country is that you're living on impoverished wages, you're living in bad conditions. Many of them have to rely on family income supplement. Many of them had their family outside the gates of this House last week protesting about those sort of poverty wages, the conditions that they live in, the lack of payment for overtime, the closure of barracks, which meant that they had to move many, many miles away from their original homes. They don't get travel allowance. A lot of them admit that they have to live in their cars because they can't afford the obnoxious and inflated rents that exist throughout this state. So we can't take our own defence forces out of poverty and pay them decent wages and conditions, but we can overnight increase our defence budget to back up a European aggressive project and to support NATO. Finally, I just want to reiterate again that if we're being forced today into voting on this, shame on you. Shame on you, Minister, and shame on the Government, and particularly those independents who are propping you up, Finian McGrath and John Halligan, whose record is to be on the side of anti-imperialism, to stand with the anti-war movement, to be against troops in Shannon, to be against the sort of NATO project that this is actually holding up. And I think they should think twice before they allow your government to push ahead with this vote in these circumstances. This requires a lot of public debate. It requires a lot of legislative scrutiny. We want to know if the Attorney-General has actually given you advice on the constitutionality of this move. You need to answer those questions before you force this down the throat of the Irish public.
Independence